Hello, everyone, and welcome to EUphoriaCon. You have reached the last panel of our first inaugural EUphoriaCon. Thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited to be here. We're at a panel called The Future of European TTRPG, where we are going to solve and mandate the future of all European TTRPG. First, to start, what is EUphoriaCon? EUphoriaCon is a one-day online-only TTRPG convention designed to bring together the diverse TTRPG creatives here locally based in Europe. And we're here to build community across borders and just be friends and get to know and support each other. Please follow and support EUphoria on all the socials listed in the description, listed in the chat where you can. My name is Aida. I'll be moderating this panel. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a Latina queer woman of color. I'm based in the Netherlands. I have tan skin, dark eyes, dark wavy hair, and I am wearing a blue paisley shirt. I'm going to go around the overlay. And Jeremy, would you please give your introduction and let us know what you do in the TTRPG community, personally, professionally, what that is.
Hey everyone, my name is Jeremy. My pronouns are he, him. I am one of the co-owners of 3 Sales Studios and developer and editor there as well. So if you've played or heard of Mapamundi or Gallows Corner, our newest game, and we're also going to be publishing City of Vespers by Nathan Blaze. If you've heard of any of those, I've played a role in all of them, whether big or small, and we have lots of other cool things that we've been working on as well. So I am a mixed race man. I'm bald. I have a patchy beard. I wear glasses, and I am currently sitting in a room full of books. I mentioned I was mixed race. My exact racial makeup is complicated, but I'm basically half white and half East Asian, specifically Taiwanese.
Thanks for being here. Lola, would you give a self-introduction, description, and let us know a little bit what you do in the TTRPG sphere?
Hi, I'm Lola. My pronouns are they, them. I am a Black person with green braids, one up on top of my head. I am squinting at everything because I'm currently quite visually challenged and wearing a black t-shirt with the hint of a TARDIS in a room with yarn behind me. Otherwise, I tend to write games, play games as well. So you can find me on random channels, most often Roll Together RPG in the UK. Sometimes, and in the past, I have been on Euphoria. The most recent game I am working on / in the process of releasing is The Wanderer's Bookshop, which was crowdfunded on BackaGit for Zine Month. And that is me.
Thank you, Lola. Naomi, please. You're muted.
Your most muted soldier. Hi, I am Naomi. You can find me at Naomi Thinks all over the internet. I thought I was going to be so polite. I'm like, I'll remember to mute myself. You can usually find me playing your favorite chicken nugget wizard at RealmsPod, and you can also find my terrible surreal jokes happening at Romerick and Deckard, where I am doing social media. I have a little red bob that I cut in my bathroom at 1 a.m, and you definitely can't tell. And a little black and white stripy shirt. So let's go.
Let's go indeed. Let's go, Apollo. That was your cue.
Hello, my name is Apollo. You can find me on the internet at Tall Nerd Apollo. I do voice acting, I do TTRPGs, I do cosplays, I do a lot of things. This is a bit that I've done on every single Euphoria thing that I've been on, and I'm not stopping it today. I am a sexy, sexy black man. I want you to picture like Aragorn if he were black and if the producers weren't cowards. Younger Strider days before the Greys set in. I've I don't know if I'm light skin or not. I have medium dark skin. I have dreads, and I'm wearing a black t-shirt, and I am in a room that is going through an identity crisis, but there are definitely books in here. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the cherry on top, Jacob.
Hi, I'm Jacob Wolf-Lefton. My pronouns are he, they. I'm a white person with long, curly brown hair that sort of gets lost in a black hoodie that I'm wearing. And I am in a white room, or it's got like white curtains in the back and a lot of clutter, embarrassingly. So don't look in the corners. And what do I do in the TTRPG space? Well, I play and I run games for like most of my life since I was about 4 years old. And I also do actual play, performing and thinking about it and devising. And I also build playing spaces for people in real life in my local community. And that's wonderful as well.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I didn't explain what I sort of do here beyond just sort of talk words at the microphone and camera. I'm one of the co-founders here at EUphoria. I'm an actual play performer. I mostly spend my life in the editing cave. I do a lot of video and audio editing, graphic design. I play on a podcast with some friends on the Tumble Through network. And I just am living and breathing most of my time in EUphoria here, and it's been such a blast. And one of the main reasons why EUphoria was funded is because we wanted to really understand what a European-centric TTRPG community with that identity at the forefront looks like, could look like, would look like, should look like. So for the next hour or so, we're going to sort of discuss very broadly where we are, where it might be tough to go, but where we're definitely going to be going. And what makes this panel for me rather exciting is we have not just a diversity of backgrounds, but a diversity of European perspectives. We're from multiple countries. We have expats, immigrants. We have people who have always been in those countries, people with other backgrounds as well. And we all have a stake in this community. So I sort of wanted to ask, or maybe let's toot our own horn a little bit about where we are now. If you watched earlier today at EUphoriaCon, we had a speaker called Yasmin talk about where TTRPGs were, specifically in the GDR. And that past was deep, complicated, nuanced. Those are all synonyms. But while we can't really go into that for each of our respective locales, where are we now? Where has Europe made a difference compared to a lot of US-centric communities? Where do we think Europe is unique compared to other communities that you might have insight or some familiarity with?
Multilingualism, I think, was where I would start. Like, that's something that Europe really offers that a lot of other communities don't necessarily offer. You know, like it doesn't necessarily, I mean, obviously we're doing this in English, but it doesn't have to be an English forward experience.
Definitely. We are all speaking English, and to show the audience, show of hands here, how many people speak another language other than English when they leave their house?
Well,
in
London?
Does it count if your family is the ones that speak the other language, so you just do it in the house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those who might not be able to visually see your screen, that was pretty much everyone raised their screen with the exception of Lola. And we're going to talk to Lola about their expertise as well on other things. But
Hold out, rough.
Damn.
No, but Lola also expressed that they can't see the screen right now, and I don't want to like deprive Lola of what is happening either. And any of our audience would be listening as well. But this is what Europe looks like. So I would say now that Europe, our community, the one we're building now, which is Europe, is sort of gaining more understanding. We should embrace the multiculturalism, the multilingualism. I've noticed that there are a lot of hyper local games happening. When I confess to the crime of being born in the United States, and anything that came out of
End the panel.
I'm not the only one here. I'm not the only one here. And when back then Ida thought about European games, it was immediately, it's all going to be Tolkien-esque games, or it's all going to be Vikings. Those were the two options. There was anything else, or there was this idea of like, oh yeah, my great grandfather was Irish, therefore I'm going to appropriate everything about there. But okay, Apollo.
Sorry, no,
This was
like a
flair
inspiration.
to talk to like show Apollo. Where
Yeah,
are
I
we
think
in like showcasing, understanding like nuanced local, in your example, Irish lore, mythology, storytelling?
yeah. This is a dangerous topic for me because it is a special interest. It is the thing that I've sold to a million people that if I ever went back into like higher third level education, I would want to specialize in Irish folklore and mythology to work towards figuring out the interaction between TTRPGs and folklore and mythology as educational resources for communities. But broadly speaking, the way that I think of how Irish mythology and folklore has been used in TTRPGs is, and this is kind of like a thing of European. I'm going to use European very, very broadly
Yep.
because we can't use European as a monolith. It's far too broad and varied, and we're also tying in the EU UK when I say European.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but very broadly, it feels like TTRPGs and game design will often look at our folklores, our mythologies, pick things that they like the flavor of, but and then they'll adapt it for their worlds, and that's great. I love adaptation, but then they won't be able to truly understand the themes that the stories originally were meant to convey, or there are aspects of the stories that are being lost in adaptation that could actually provide a lot more to the story. From a business perspective, I feel like the EU in the last few years has been really a more eyes are on us. The
Yeah.
spotlights are starting to drift towards us, so like every now and then there's a spotlight. For example, like for the last few weeks and for the next couple of weeks, I'm running a Daggerheart mini series that's sponsored by Darrington Press. And that's really cool that they would say, realistically, the majority of their audience and the people that they are pitching their products for, it's an American audience, but they sponsored me, and I'm based out in Ireland. They sponsored some friends of mine that are based out of Portugal, and they did a full AP of Daggerheart in Portuguese, and that was absolutely incredible. And it was sponsored by Darrington Press. So companies are slowly starting to look towards us. Son of Oak, who have the Mist engine games, Legend in the Mist, for example, the one that they're currently rolling out, just had a incredibly successful, and when I mean like fully funded in less than a half hour Kickstarter for an expansion and setting book and adventure book that is all based off of Irish folklore and mythology, written by an Irishman, created by an Irish studio. So it really feels like we're on an upward trend of companies looking towards us and saying, "Oh, this is not only an untapped market, but it's untapped creative power." From that creative point of view, it feels like our stories are not only being heard, but really, really paid homage to and really honored, as opposed to just, "Oh, that's a cool name or a cool idea for a monster. Let me take that." It's like, no, let me learn. We're being learned of and learned from, and really we're being put in the spotlight, and I think
Yeah.
that's pretty fun.
I wholeheartedly agree. European games and European perspectives and the willingness to understand, even from having lived that culture, that heritage, is really shining through in a lot of games. And even if games don't necessarily have that specific angle, games from European creators are being internationally recognized with international awards. We have some people here who have won award winning projects, stories, games. Any of those people would like to speak up on what it's been like, or have you how have you kept the European perspective or flavor while being really seen in, I'll say it, by the US market, which is this big monolith that I think we're trying to identify Europe from.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about that because I have a podcast that was produced here in Berlin, with in English, but with diverse sort of range of accents, of English accents. We had an Irish actor on it, we had a German actor on it, and we had a Venezuelan actor on it. And so I think it's something that you can really see here in Europe, and my connections, because I'm an actor as well, and my connections to that I'm going to give a little framing. When you're an actor working in Europe, you have like multiple careers. You have a career in the languages that you speak. Each one is a separate culture and a separate kind of market that you're working in. And then you have your English language career as well, which is an international language, and it kind of spans across the EU. And one of the things that I think we have here is the locality of stories that can be rooted in people's own languages and own culture, and an ability to cross those cultures and make new blends, creates something that I think is quite special here with what we have going on. And also in that, it's also important to shine the spotlight across the world as well, because there are other markets and other localities that are on other continents that are booming in the role-playing world, but not in the view of the English role-playing world. And I think one of the things that is important to point out here is we're all doing this in English in places where there's also an entire tradition of role-playing games and culture of playing role-playing games in the local languages, the sort of mother tongues of the countries, and they have different playing cultures. They have different games that come out of them, and just really, really cool stuff going on that we're almost losing out on that beauty if we're only limiting ourselves to an English-speaking role-playing world as well. So I think this is one of the great things that Europe has to offer.
Is that balance. For the aforementioned topic, Naomi or Jeremy, I was calling both of you out as well with that last comment. I'm muted.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. Yeah, I'm not muted. Okay. Yeah, I can speak on this. Well, to begin with, I feel very lucky and privileged to be a part of the European TTRPG scene at the moment, because I'm in London right now, but I come to London by way of New York City, and then prior to that, by way of Hong Kong. Yeah, I know, Ida. Yeah, the New York connection, we talked about it in the past. But yeah, so I'm by way of the US, and prior to that, I was living in Asia for a while. So I first got involved in TTRPGs when I was living in Hong Kong, which is, and then I got involved in them when I was living in America. So the scenes are very different, but I can say that particularly with regards to America, like everything is very D&D centric. Like Dungeons and Dragons is the monolith that lords over everything, and many independent TTRPG producers and developers, they sort of have to live with that and deal with that huge Wizards of the Coast presence, often in the form of, oh, can I make my supplement be compatible with 5e? And my experience here is that there's much less of that. You have much more creativity going on. You have much more, we talked about localized stories, but I also feel like you have much more daring concepts that are not really being initiated in the United States. Like obviously you have companies like Rowan Deckard. You have like Eat the Reich, major game, and then you have like Soul Muppet. You have games like Mad as Hell. That's just talking about the UK in general. Games that are explicitly anti-capitalist, dealing with fascist regimes. Games that are not just about banding together as a party and fighting fantasy monsters, though that's fine as well, because I think Europe also, when we're talking about games where you band together and fight fantasy monsters, there are more interesting versions of that in Europe than there are in many other parts of the world right now. Even if we're just talking about 5e hacks, I'm looking at Brancolonia, which is like an Italian Dungeons and Dragons inspired game. I do believe it uses the 5e rules, but it's meant to evoke a sort of like Italian fantasy, almost like they call it like spaghetti fantasy kind of vibe to it, which is very different from, I guess, the bog standard Forgotten Realms setting that is quite popular in North America. And then you have things like, Historia, which is another Dungeons and Dragons 5e hack, also from Italy, but where all the characters are animals. So it takes on this kind of like almost like a Red Wall, but much more serious vibe to it. And so that's always been my impression of the European TTRPG scene, full of creativity and a willingness to kind of delve into other topics that other scenes have not yet really perhaps had the wherewithal or the freedom to navigate. And so I feel very lucky to be a part of this scene. And I think it's something that, all the creatives here should definitely embrace and take into account.
Yeah, they don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the nuance and
Yeah.
Maybe thankfully they don't dare touch certain topics, because who else would dare to make a game like Eat the Reich, Naomi? Any award-winning Eat the Reich.
Yeah. That I definitely was involved in the making of and didn't just turn up to the company long after that happened. Yeah. Like I think it's kind of interesting to hear you talk about like what it's like in America, because obviously as I've never played a game in America, like I'm aware of, the online AP space. But for me, like I started playing in New Zealand and then came to Europe. And so for me, I've always been very lucky in the groups that I've always been, have really been heavy on safety tools and really heavy on indie games, and really heavy on getting weird with it. Like I think one of the first games I ever played is Everyone is John, which is kind of an insane game to start someone in an RPG journey with, because you're all playing 5 different aspects of one guy. And so I think that it's kind of interesting to hear the perspective of how homogenous it can be elsewhere. And I think part of that is also because European history is so interlaced and confused and like combative and interesting, and you get a lot more perspectives when you learn about history, because so many European countries have been inside each other's pockets at various points in history, that I think it makes for maybe a little bit more of a varied perspective on things, like, and we get to take and play with that history. For example, in the award-winning Eat the Reich, which I can take no credit for.
Take a little. Do it.
I just make the jokes. On the internet. I'm sorry. But it's fun to do that sort of like interesting and gritty, like, because especially like London and England, we're so drowning in our own history, and in a way that's almost sometimes a little bit weird and reverential, but like it's interesting how much we can bring, because there's so much more like recorded history that the people are generally referring to, irrespective of the fucking colonization, that has happened post facto. But like there's all this extra like periods and stuff and different ways that things were done that we then get to pull from. So for example, for Romerick and Deckard, we're bringing out Hollows, which is like kind of like a fucked up Victoriana, and like that's really fun and it's really interesting, and it's nice to do that in a way that's like we get to do a lot of these things in a way that are not reverential to our own history, which I think is kind of an interesting thing about the way that Romerick and Deckard specifically writes games, in a way that's, and Meta Dungeon, which is what we're currently. I can't kill the Kickstarter; it won't die; it's still going.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, that we get to look at ourselves a little bit more clear-eyed, I think, because we're not encouraged maybe to mythologize our own history as much as perhaps the Americans are. No offense.
We're not encouraged to mythologize our own history.
I think yeah, I mean, like
I was gonna say put it on a t-shirt. I mean,
I was like, there's definitely like some varied perspectives, and I don't, but I think that there is like, even as like Britain's whole like we're an empire and it's tea and cakes and shit, which is not really like the whole thing. Like there is definitely like, even anyone English will also be like, and we're kind of shit, like
those are the best games. Those are the
Yeah.
best games.
like, and I feel like there is a little bit less of like, we can be quite honest that there is like a lot of stuff about us that we don't like and that is kind of shit, and there is not a necessarily as much of a blithe sort of acceptance of our own myth, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say.
I see you. So speaking about shit, there are challenges to growing Europe's future. There are roadblocks. There are things. They're not necessarily European exclusive. And I want to sort of talk to Lola about this first. And I know Lola has published several games. Beautiful overlays, art, nuance, kind storytelling. Lola is based in the UK. I am based in the Netherlands. If I were to get a printed copy of Lola's games because of wherever we are now or even going forward, it's hard. There's layers, there's bureaucracy, there's laws, there's taxes, there's importation, there's fees, there's news that I don't want to touch on. Lola, what are some challenges to growing even within Europe as someone who publishes games, makes games, wants to print games?
So I guess I've
Yeah.
in terms of like there are a lot of challenges that, especially, well, I mean, a lot of the barriers from for the UK itself
Oof.
are the UK's fault in some ways, and others are the changing climate of the world, essentially, and how that impacts the fact that, I guess, well, the UK itself is an island, and being able to get things off that island and into the countries that we managed to very lovingly snub by deciding that we didn't want to be part of them. Not me, but like so I guess
You mean old people? You mean old racists? That's
no,
what you mean.
I thoroughly believe it was the fact that we rested on our laurels far too much and didn't, and basically, well, as someone that lived in London at the time, very much decided, well, I mean, people know that actually the EU is like has a marked benefit for us, which is it's a different conversation.
But
Yeah,
what
yeah.
does that have to do with
It's a different
TTRPGs?
yeah, it's a
Sorry,
different
sorry.
Yes. Yes. So obviously the challenges that we're facing right now are the fact that everywhere is now introducing further tariffs and also extra fun custom things.
Oof.
So that will be coming into force in July for UK to EU trade. But one thing that we have seen, I think, from way back in like 2018, 2019, is the cost of production and that rising. For example, like I printed my first non-TTRPG book, but printed my first book in 2018. And then coming to print the second one in 2020, the price for printing in Germany had, and with the same paper and printing, had risen threefold. So it would cost me more than I basically raised for the cost of printing to be able to do so. And I think that that's a thing that is very interesting and challenging in the way that we have to look at where we produce things when it comes to like printing and TTRPGs, where we once had access to a global market to be able, which allowed us more choice and the ability to kind of play around with different types of production, and then also leverage shipping and tariffs to make it easier to produce and also distribute books. We now have a much bigger challenge when it comes to those very same things, because it's now more expensive to produce in different countries. But for scale, we have to consider that actually the printer that is in Lithuania or in China might still be better than printing here in the UK, but that will have an impact on where we can then send it after, or at least the cost to then send it to different places after, because obviously the place that it's printed is then marked as a country of origin. And when we're talking about distribution, and I mean, obviously, I'm just working on a very kind of small scale, like as someone that kind of does their own production, and other than I don't do all my own printing because this printer couldn't handle all that. But like having to figure out and try and jump through the hoops as a small business is a very interesting thing. And I firmly believe that we should be making collectives.
I
to be
think
able
that's
to
very European, actually.
Yeah.
And exactly to what you were saying, that things are more expensive. I think that's both a boon and a bane, because my feeling compared to the US versus a lot of Europe, especially European Union, my own experience here in the Netherlands is that we do value things hyper local because we understand intrinsically, speaking for my understanding of Dutch locality here, how it affects the local economy. It's more sustainable, it's better in the long run. We're actually funding careers, but you also have to accept that will be more expensive. And thus, the counter side is that if you want something cheap, are you actually harming more people? Are you actually contributing to pollution? Should you feel guilty about wanting the Temu version or this and that? So it's a lot of balancing these priorities. But I feel that it's also a very European, or by my sense, Dutch conversation or thing to think about, to have in the first place. Where my idea with the US is like capitalism, race to the bottom. What's the cheapest? What is the mass? How fast can AI churn this to make my buck? Whereas here in Europe, we're going to balance these higher things, even at the literal financial or emotional expense to us as creatives and business owners.
Well, it's less and it's less that it's necessarily ideally cheaper to print elsewhere, and not considering the cost of shipping, and not just the cost financially, but also the cost in terms of miles and distribution. It's also the consideration of where you will then have to send them afterwards, because of course, if you want to ship to, or you want to be able to do things with EU markets now from the UK, or actually anywhere, you are best placed almost to print and distribute within the EU, which creates something that is hyper local for EU customers, and looking at things in ways of, okay, well, in losing the economy of scale, can you actually produce things that like have that hyperlocal benefit, but in like different economies, and like spread out. I mean, I've done most of my production since like 2020 in the UK, and that's been for printing books and various things. But even before that, I was still centered here. It was just one of my printers worked with Germany way back. But yeah, I found it to be an interesting conversation, and I almost wonder whether, like, with the things like the GPSR and IOSS and various things, that we have to look at the regulatory framework that now impacts us being able to produce stuff both physically and also digitally, and how we then distribute it to people. I almost feel like it's, as I said, I almost feel like it's with benefit to look forward to creating more collectives. And I know that there are a couple of collectives that have created things that are based in the US, but I think that that's something that should be part of the future of European TTRPGs, that we should look at building collectives that aren't just based in one European country, and maybe span across them, so that we can work together to reduce the barriers to connecting with each other, that are I think in direct defiance with the fact that, like, our governments are trying to isolate us more and make our world smaller. And I think the biggest conversations that we have been having in Europe, especially like in France and everywhere else, and in Italy and everywhere else, is the power of the people is to affect change that we want to see. And I
That's
think
a good point, Lola. I'm going to pause you there,
sorry.
because I think that's an excellent kind of actionable at the end. we have to make collectives. We have to celebrate our individuality with everyone else collectively, so to say. We have some more challenges we're going to talk about, but I'd like to invite us all to take a very quick break. We'll be back before 5 minutes, actually. We're just going to refresh our things. I need to open a window because I don't have air behind me. So we're going to be right back. See you very soon. We're going to continue this conversation. Hello, everyone. We're back. Thanks for waiting on us. But we took our little break and took care of ourselves. Been talking for like another, I almost said quartier, 15 minutes or so on the future of European TTRPGs. And I want to expand the topic of what are the current challenges we're facing as we understand it in the European TTRPG scene, sphere, community, network, hive. One of the plus positive things that was mentioned by Naomi, I believe, was we love multilingualism. How the translations going into Italian, Albanian? How are the translations going into Limburgs of all our games?
Grossi Orky Gay is coming out from Rorodeged, and I am big gay orcs. Hell yeah, in Italian. Like I'm so ready. I'm so ready. I can't wait. I'm like locked in on that.
But what's the consideration for, like, okay, we want to have our game shown to as many people as possible that aren't necessarily English speaking. Is that a calculation actively made? Is it something that we like to do in the future? Is it
Yes.
just costs preventing that
Yeah, so
happening?
for us, it's often, weirdly enough, Roma Connecticut has a really big like Italian contingent who's interested in our games.
Cool.
So quite often it's actually players being like, I would really love this in a different language that makes the difference. But with the state of the economy being the way it is, the costs of translations versus the size of the print runs that we're able to do, that margin is just getting smaller and smaller, and that's like really sad because it's something that I really enjoy, that we get to do. It's a lot of fun. It means doing the work of making a book and redoing the formatting and like thinking about new illustrations and stuff and all that stuff that you really enjoy when you first make a book and you get to do it again. So yeah, it's difficult, I think, for us.
Anyone else considering translations? Lola, you had your hand up?
So this is more of a kind of thought for things like especially because I was reading like a discussion on the production value of books and TTRPGs. I'm wondering if what we can do in the future is, when we're looking at the at that and then looking at how we compensate for the fact that like it costs a lot to do print runs in smaller amounts, when that's something that we need to make it more viable to do translation. Wondering if like changing the way we look and create games in the with production value in mind, and not just saying, okay, well, we need to have different illustrations, we need to have all of these things, looking at how we can streamline games to make it easier to translate and rely on that translation, and looking at the way we can do those things to make it easier to access having different language printed books.
Interesting. I had the pleasure of talking to some Dutch game designers, game writers at local conventions here based in the Netherlands. And I had full conversations with them in Dutch, but all their content was in English. And I asked, why don't you have a local Dutch printout, even digital version? And they said, because in order to be viable, we have to look beyond our own borders. We have to consider the US market. We have to consider other markets that don't speak Dutch. And conversely, I spoke to other game designers whose content is exclusively in Dutch. And I asked, why isn't this, or are you considering an English language printout? And this particular game was like a super hyper local setting of a super hyper local time period as well. And the gist of what I understood was that they lose something as well in the identity of that game by translating these terms to English. There was a lot of local lingo in that game used, and they said they didn't feel like they could do it justice in English, and it felt that it sort of, what was the word they use? My translation, cheapened the game and the story they wanted to tell. Even understanding we're at a convention, and one of the goals is to earn business, that this could be a business limiter. Do they gain more fans or less fans? It's hard to tell what fans you don't have because of a decision you made. So these are all, from my perspective, this really hard thing to balance. You want to make bigger audiences, but that comes at a cost to even do in the first place. Do you lose an audience by translating? Do you I think you gain audiences by translating, but what do you lose? And that's a very European consideration to have as well. One definitely, I'm sure, is not really so considered in US market, for example, where I remember back when I was still playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, a friend of mine from Italy said, "Oh, look, a new content about after school clubs that I have no resonance or understanding with," because as someone born in the US, I understood exactly what that thing was, and I had to explain to a lot of European friends, this is a thing. After school clubs, glee clubs, sororities, fraternities, these are things that they had no inkling to, but they were being marketed to heavily, even though they're in Europe. So
Every time I see something that's like, he's a freshman, I'm like, what does that mean?
What does
I
that
don't
mean?
understand what it means.
Old man freshman.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, sure.
Why is the man fresh?
Yeah,
I think it was
He's-
interesting when like
put him back in the oven. He's not baked yet. Sorry,
Mhm.
Jeremy, go.
Oh no, I think it was interesting when I think it was Tales from the Loop, which is it I think the default setting is in Sweden. Am I
Yeah.
correct? And
Yeah.
it's about like
Simon Stein.
Swedish high school students. So when they brought that to the English speaking market, specifically like the United States and the UK, they emphasized that Swedish setting first. But I do believe afterwards then they did make a concession, like if you want to set this game in America, here's like a similar thing in Boulder, Colorado, if you want to do it. And my thought was, no, let's make them try to do it in Swedish. Like let's promote the local culture that this game is a part of. Because I think if you do it earnestly, and if you make a point of saying, look, you might not immediately understand this and you might mess up, but that's okay. We give you permission to kind of take this information and perhaps learn from it and extrapolate it with your own thoughts and feelings and emotions. You're probably going to have a very enriching role-playing experience if you do that. I think that's a perfect way to present a product. You don't always need to default to the okay, you're a freshman in such and such a college somewhere.
Like we make movies, and
Yeah.
like there's plenty of like movies and TV shows that are in a particular place or have a very particular thing, and it's like the idea that we have to be like, no, we have to make it specific for us in what we're doing. And it's like there's plenty of like other ways to get cultural references, that we can sort of do, have a little bit of taste making research and that sort of thing that I think would be really interesting.
Yeah. They're not all hobbits and they're not all Vikings.
I mean, this sort of ties into oh yeah,
Those
Jason, yeah.
literally get to be Vikings. So that is, I think, freely one of the amazing things that freely tapped into. Like, we're going to celebrate our Nordic culture and we're going to be unabashedly proud of it. You all get to be part of you. Lucky you.
As a New Zealander, the Hobbit thing is like, it's brutal. It's you have to understand the tax laws that were made for that fucking film.
One day I will endeavor to understand those tax laws.
I feel like there's an element of something that you said earlier that kind of ties into here of how we mythologize ourselves, which for the purposes of marketing is a very interesting interaction where it's a very double-edged blade, where from the Irish perspective, the major selling point for a lot of Irish products that revolve around storytelling is often going to be our folklore and mythology,
Mm.
because obviously the diaspora is worldwide. They're well-known stories. It's a well-known aesthetic, and I am the mythology guy. I'm a mythology guy. Like that's all I do and all I talk about. If you give me the chance,
You are legendary.
something. Stop it now. But something that runs the issue is, are those the only stories that can come out of us? It's sort of similar to how, like, a lot of Irish cinema was known for being very kind of like very bleak and very depressing. And then at what point do we go, guys, we have more than just our folklore and our mythology?
Mhm.
Like, when do we start making TTRPGs about the political aspects of us, about being games kind of like Sin Eater really meshed with an Irish setting very well, because I was like, oh, okay, the famine. We can talk about centuries of colonization and oppression, and the courage and the stories that come out of breaking free of that and fighting against that. But that is a harder pitch than the treasures of the Tuatha De Danann. So it's sort of like country to country in the European market. Every time that somebody puts a pen to paper, it's sort of like, are we going to lean into the things, or are we going to try bring in other aspects? Like Yellow Madhouse did this 5e adventure that's all Slavic mythology, and they kind of they put the cake of Slavic folklore, Slavic mythology, and then once you're there, they pull the cord, and then the box falls over your head, and you're like, "Oh my god, I'm being exposed to so much culture beyond just the folklore and mythology." And I'd love to see the TTRPG space in Europe kind of take that direction as well, where we use the big thing, and then we're like, and here are all the things that we can't communicate in the original in the first sentence of the pitch.
Yeah. It sounds super cool. To go into the last topic, and I'm going to immediately go into Jacob for this one. So we've already talked about ways we'd like to see improvements or ways to break through some of those challenges. But there are things we are doing right. We being the European broader community. And one thing, at least I've noticed very much, is that there is a lot more adjacent support from other adjacent communities, so to say. And Jacob, I know you as someone who is deeply embedded in multiple communities, and they all complementary to each other. That being the TTRPG community. So, from your experience, how is that improving the scope of TTRPGs in Europe from your German perspective?
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about this because before this talk I went through what are the things that I think TTRPG is, like in what places in my life or that I see around me, and I came up with like 4 categories to talk about. We have in TTRPG, we've got like the designers and the hobby focus. So this is like the general audience who's like buying TTRPGs to play them at home. And this includes also the TTRPG creators who are making stuff for them, and LARP creators as well. And also like gaming cafes, which in Berlin, there's at least 2, maybe 3 of them. There's new gaming stores. So from a Berlin perspective, what I see is there are more and more spaces where people are trying to bring these in. We have several different like Facebook groups for role-playing games, and more people are coming on them and saying, hey, I've never done this and I want to do it before, or I want to do it. And then it just is like a constant stream of people joining. And so my perspective here is that TTRPGs in Europe, I mean, Berlin is its own little pocket, but like
Yes.
people are coming from all over the place with an interest. And I think TTRPG across Europe is growing. And I think it's a good thing. And conventions as well, and also in Berlin, because I can really only speak to here as the place where I'm paying attention. There's a new Berlin International Role Playing Convention,
Yeah.
BeerCon.
You're cool.
They're expanding this year. They're trying to be like a 500-person convention, and they have a trade floor and everything. And it's very exciting because they've been doing this now. It's their 3rd year where they've been experimenting of like, is there an audience? Do we think there's enough people to have a critical mass to do this here? And to see all of these conventions, someone brought up there's a role-playing convention or like an RPG convention in Lisbon that someone brought up in the chat that I was looking at as earlier, and they're just in every country there's tiny little role-playing conventions, and it's so cool that you can travel around and go to all of these places, and there are more of them popping up, and that's great. So designers hobby conventions, they all seem to be like growing and interesting and local. There's also academic tracks. There's game design programs in universities there's video game design programs, but also people go into them or into media studies programs and then move into role-playing games. And there are some game-focused programs that are sort of like for impact games or purposeful games, and those tend to get a lot of people who come from LARP coming in. And those are legitimate academic programs with funding from European governments, and sometimes like cross-governmental funding to do these things, to try to research in the role-playing space. And so that's so cool. And there are people excited about that in Europe and who are following that in Europe. And then the fourth category that I see is the actual play category, which is sort of like role-playing games as performance, as entertainment. And again, there's studios popping up across Europe, both in English and in their local country languages, to provide or like build entertainment for different audiences, for the local audiences, for the international audiences. And there's very cool projects with cross-cultural and cross-language work. I spoke about mine, but there's also the 3-city revamp from EUphoria, which is takes place in Europe with a diverse European crowd. And I think you are speaking multiple languages in it.
You're speaking Dutch, French, and German because that's where our characters are. And that was a casting requirement for starting the game even as well.
And that's so cool. And so that's an opportunity to make more projects like this, which are deeply rooted in the cultures. And then when we talk about actual play and media, there's a whole space that I'm starting to look into, which is basically like the funding landscape for media projects from the EU and co-production schemes. And these are treaties between countries that allow you to build productions with studios in different places. And when we come back to that question of collectives and cross-border work, I think that there's a lot we can do to link together across Europe. And the UK is also included in some of these co-production treaties and agreements, and also other countries in the world. And so we have these opportunities to look at what are the structures that Europe is trying to set up to build these in adjacent industries, and how can we take advantage of them and join together and figure out how to navigate them and put these collaborations together. I think there's potential there. And certainly from Europe, there is money in the creative industries, and that's really promising. So that's my like bright-eyed sort of like very sort of happy to look forward into the future, that I think there are good things coming for us in role-playing games in Europe.
I know there are good things going. And before I end it up, I just want to give everyone else here an opportunity very quickly. We are Europe here. So what are you personally or your professional endeavors personally doing that is on the right track, that is, you think, toot your horn a bit, a model that more people should be adopting? What are you doing right, and why is it better for the European community as it all? So sparkle. We learned about adding sparkles for ourselves. Who wants to sparkle? I'm going to point the people to sparkle otherwise. Sparkle, Jeremy.
Yeah, one thing I'm really proud about at 3 Studios is the work that we've done in highlighting diverse perspectives, particularly people of color, marginalized people, and marginalized topics within games. Our game Mapamundi highlighted a bunch of different cultures all across the fantasy continent that is Eurasia, but obviously channeled through that fantasy lens. And we tried to stay away from sort of the classic medieval Britain that is so often the default, and instead we went from France to China to Vietnam to Mongolia to Siberia, all within the context of our setting. And we got the right cultural consultants to help us with the material for regions in the world that have historically been portrayed poorly in TTRPGs, for instance, Vietnam, for instance, the Arabian Peninsula, and so on and so forth. So I'm very proud of that. And we continued that with, Gallows Corner, which is our game about being a peasant in medieval England, and how, that doesn't necessarily mean that you were specifically a white person. There are many perspectives that were at play during that time period, which was more diverse than is often given credit for. So that was something we tried to stress both in the context of the book, in the rules, and also in the artwork. And then finally, I'm very proud that we're now publishing games. And so City of Vespers is our first game not published in-house, but it's by Nathan Blades, and it really channels that
Good.
queer ballroom perspective, combined with sort of an anime shine that I think is really unlike anything else. And I think it's important that we continue doing this, and that more companies sort of champion these perspectives, because the stereotype, if you're outside of Europe, is that Europe is all white people, and that is very far from the truth. And I think we need to continue pushing forward the idea that no, this is an extremely diverse part of the world, both in terms of race, both in terms of lived experience, and everything else that comes in between.
Thank you for taking everything I usually say at the end. I don't have to repeat it again. Naomi,
got you.
Sparkle.
Yeah, sort of. So I made a list because it said what are we going to see next in European TTRPGs? So I thought really heavily about that and not about any of this other stuff. So don't worry about it. And I just wanted to run down some things that I thought were really interesting that I think is going to be happening more.
Yeah.
So everyone's LARPing. There's a lot more LARPing happening. I think we're going to see more LARPing. We're going to see more immersives. Immersive is the new keyword for theater, and I think that is going to start hitting us as well. Yes, bring out your sword. Very good. I think that we've done our like solo games minute, and I think now we're gonna get start leaning into 2-player games, and things are gonna get like 2-player and 3-player games is gonna be the next thing. And EUphoriaCon is next weekend. I think Jubenture is gonna be one of the next things, the way that Blood on the Clock Tower was. I think that's going to start pushing more into our space, and we're going to see more of these RPG / escape room / murder mystery sort of things happening, as the space sort of goes wide as well as specific, if you know what I mean. And I think we're going to get more meta. I think we're at the point where so many people are thinking about RPGs so much, and there's so many different perspectives, that we're going to get more meta, more weird with it. And I'm looking forward for the first choose your own adventure actual play, which I haven't seen yet, but that's my challenge.
Stealing
things for me. I hope that this Kickstarter dies at some point. I'm really excited. I'm writing for Hollows. That's exciting. Yeah. So doing that, and then we're doing a Liminal London, the Blitz, and I'll be bringing more facts about London, but in the time of conflict and World War, and I think that would be very interesting. And that's my bit.
That sounds amazing. Europe is in for a great future. Lola, can you give us a brief sparkle what you're doing that is right and that everyone will benefit from?
I think having discussions about how we look at the world and how we what we choose to consume, and being able to examine that, right? And that's I think that's what I'm working on at the moment, and also taking that on myself in when I'm doing other writing projects, and doing a lot more research and attempting to connect to things and talk to people about things that will then influence my writing to basically improve what I'm putting out, essentially. So talking to people, getting community input, and making sure that I'm bringing not just my own perspective, but perspectives from people around me and everywhere, and people that aren't necessarily directly around me, but from other countries, and trying to find ways to weave that into my game, whilst also attempting to teach people something, or, well, not necessarily teach people, more helping people to examine
I
what
think
they're
you're
working with.
I think you're succeeding, if I may say so, Lola, so far, and I look forward to your continued success. Apollo, tell us a sparkle.
Hello. Sparkle for me, there are some plans. There are plans that I cannot talk about right now because the haters will sabotage. That um, I I'm a pretty young guy, but I have a lot of big ideas and aspirations for things that I would love to do around folklore, mythology, tabletop, and particularly and specifically making people actually learn about the things that they are including in fantasy.
Mhm.
So everybody, one of my biggest gripes is like people use banshees wrong in fiction a lot because, or like, here's a hot take: if you're using a banshee in a TTRPG, it should not have any ability to attack you. It should only be there as an omen, and it should be paired with other things. But beyond that, um, what I'm doing right now is I'm gonna be realistic about my skill set. I'm loud and I can carry myself with the, as my friend described it, the audacity of a mediocre white man in a C-suite. And
That's a talent.
that's a talent. And as soon yeah, I've started doing it with some companies. I mean, like again, Darrington Press is working with more European companies. What I want to do is, I'm the type of person that I will say, if I rise, I'm bringing the homies with me.
Excellent.
I want to get myself into the rooms where there are these big international publishers, these big international companies, and I want to get in their faces and I want to say, don't forget about your your European audiences.
Mhm.
Yes, it's great what you're doing. Why are all your official live streams at times that we can't see things? Why are you not collaborating with creators over there? If you're doing influencer marketing, why are you ignoring a whole continent? Like, I one a personal goal for me over the next couple of years is to put myself in situations where I can just get in people's faces and say, "Put the attention on us."
Yep.
Yeah,
100% agree. And when we say us, I mean faces, experiences, backgrounds of the people who are physically at this panel in that sort of broader representation.
yeah,
100%. And I'll sparkle me, Euphoria, more broadly as a way to sort of end this so we can let our producer have a snack. Is I think we're going to see a lot. We're collectively harnessing a lot of positive energy and realization that we don't have to put up with the 2 in the morning uh, wake up times, with the references that are very US centric or that are appropriated or are less nuanced that we're accustomed to, because I think Europeans, my perspective is that much more open to other cultures because the border is 2 hours away, right? Sort of thing. I think because of that, we're going to see more propulsion towards these sort of communities like Euphoria. We're going to have more of these conventions at European friendly time zones with representatives who are based in Europe, no matter what their background and perspective might be, as long as it's sort of a positive, collaborative, a compassionate one as well. I think we're going to see, as someone who is very invested in APs, we're going to see a lot more diverse APs. I think we're going to see a lot more multilingual APs. Technology is improving, tools are improving, and I'm not talking about like generative AI. I'm talking about more nuanced, iterative tools that help us improve accessibility as well. And those are things we are also very mindful of here in Europe. And they're going to be much more standardized. They're going to be more commonly seen and easier to apply as well. We're going to see this con next year. I'm just putting it out there. I'm hereby declaring you're going to see this convention here next year. And that's about it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you, audience, for chipping in, for being here, for all your support. Let's do a quick round of outros before we sort of send it off into the night. I'm going to go backwards on the overlay. Jacob, where can people find you on the internet? What should they follow and know about?
Hi, yes. You can find me at Water Mosaic on pretty much anywhere on the internet. I have an award-winning podcast called The Witches of Wadera Keep, which is currently episode 15 will come out next week. And you can see me occasionally on actual play channels like EUphoria, Who Hurt You, D8 Dungeon Transmissions, and some other ones. You can also catch me live in Berlin at a monthly show called Tales Held Dear, which is an improv comedy fantasy role-playing show. And I also run a first Tuesdays TTRPG one-shots night for anybody who wants to come. We have like a couple tables and we're helping to grow other one-shots nights in Berlin. So if you're in Berlin, drop me a line and I'll help try to hook you up with those things.
Might be calling you. Apollo. You. Yeah, you, cutie.
Hello, I didn't see you there. My name is Apollo. You can find me on the internet at TallNerdApollo. I do voice acting, I do TTRPGs, I do cosplay. You can find me very specifically on the internet doing TTRPGs over on my channel, Mics and Mimics. We're doing Daggerheart, baby. We're entering the back end of the miniseries. There was an attempted assassination of a prince, and now one of my players is really trying to get it on with like a moth knight. So that's pretty fun. After that, there's some 5e. We're just gonna sprinkle in Legend in the Mist. I have a few charity things coming up. But yeah, keep up. I get to work with incredible channels like Euphoria and a lot of other Irish-based ones, like D8 Dungeon. Shout out D8 Dungeon again, and Hearthfry Tales, and all the Pookies and all the homies. And I can't wait to see you guys there. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Aida and Sam, for having me.
Yeah, Mothman Uwu. Naomi.
Don't have
The uwu just got me so off guard. I was like, oh no. Hi, I'm Naomi. You can find me all over the internet, and Naomi Thinks It. I play your most wonderful chicken nugget wizard over on Realms of Peril and Glory. You can find my show at The Kilder, and you can find my bad jokes at realmrickanddeckard.com. That's it. Go and play a sick game. Thanks, team. Let's go.
So bad it's good. Jeremy.
Hello, I'm Jeremy. You can find me on the internet under the name Pixel Grotto on Blue Sky and various other places. Also, check out 3salestudio.com for all of our TTRPGs, Mapamundi, Gallows Corner, City of Espers. Mapamundi and Gallows Corner are both available on drive-thru as well. Mapamundi is out. It's currently digital and physical, and Gallows physical copies are shipping shortly. And the City of Espers will be crowdfunding at the end of this year. So check us out if you're interested in the idea of an exploration and ecology RPG, a Peasants Revolt RPG, or an RPG that takes inspiration from ballroom culture and combines it with manga action.
Kick ass. And I've been Aida, one of the co-founders here at Euphoria. You can find me on Blue Sky at In the Pan. I decided 5 months was enough time to stop lurking on social media. I want to thank very specially Darcy, Sam, and Michelle for their amazing help in coordinating this entire day of panels. They've done an amazing job in front and in back of house as well. Thank you to all of you as well. I want to give another special shout out to people who have supported, companies who have supported this convention, because even though we're sort of grassroots starting this, we do care about respecting and compensating panelists' time and expertise. I think something very important. If you have the means to do it, you should do so. It's not that hard. So specifically, a big thank you to Lucky Leaf Teas, the Moonshine Adventure Company, and Rune Fable Dice. Thank you so much for your support. Please make sure to give love to those companies. Their links will be below and in chat. And let them know that supporting endeavors like this makes a difference and should be encouraged. So check out the amazing things they have on offer as well. If you have been following EUphoriaCon, that will be it for our panels today. But we have scheduled an entire day of off-stream TTRPG games at our Discord. All slots are filled. It was very popular. We're going to see how we can increase this capacity for next year. But there is so much to look forward to. We have accomplished so much. Congratulations to everyone involved. Aida, stop talking. Sam is tired. Good night.
And Lola, do you want to do your plug?
I'm so sorry, Lola.
I got it. We're good. We're good. We're
Okay.
good.
I'm so sorry. Lola, plug.
Okay.
You
Well-
get the last word and you say goodbye.
Okay. I have been Lola, also very visually challenged today. I usually wear glasses, but they're not working for me. But you can find me at thirdvoltyarns.com or at thirdvoltyarns.com on Blue Sky. And you can find my games at johnsonofair.itch.io. And if you're looking to find me in person, UK Games Expo, if you happen to be in Hall 4, I'm there somewhere. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. And also, if you have taken part in any of the other sessions today, I attended one of the sessions this morning. It was very good. I assume the rest of the day was just as excellent. So hopefully we'll see you all next year for EUphoriaCon. But for now, good night and goodbye.